Welcome to Saturday's Warrior. We're doing our Week 9 picks, and with me, as always, we got Adam. Thanks for joining.
Happy to be here, Trevor.
And so before we get into everything, please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We do this every week. Also on after games, I've been doing my instant reactions afterwards. Also, at the beginning of each week, we do our Big 12 power rankings. And then we got these as well as any other content throughout the week. So be sure to subscribe and catch that. And then also let us know as we make our picks. Let us know what your picks would be in the comments below. We love the engagement. So before we get into this week's picks, as always, we want to review how we did this past week. So last week, as you remember, I did not have this slide pulled up. So this was from week 7. Where we were at, and it kind of stinks because I had started making up some ground in week 6 and lost a bit of it last week. So much for that. So this week, these were our picks. Let's look first at our Big 12 picks. What we're doing, and well, you did considerably better than I did once again.
Well, the Cincy Baylor game was a surprise. I mean, that was a bit of a toss-up like we talked about, but Baylor able to go on the road and get an important victory. That was big. UCF almost pulled that off against Oklahoma. I was shocked they kept it that close. And we've been saying for a while that I think Oklahoma's going to get caught one week. I didn't think it was UCF. And then I watched the end of that game and I thought it was UCF. I thought they were going to pull that out. Texas Houston was close. I mean, props to the Cougars. I know it's been a down year for them. I've been really negative on them, but boy, they really took it to Texas and almost pulled away with that. Kansas State making us look really bad by trouncing TCU and Hoover and company. So that was not a great look for TCU. A big win for Kansas State. They look pretty strong. And Oklahoma State on the road, they're unstoppable. I do not want to end our season in Bedlam because, man, that's a scary team right now. They're clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah, absolutely. I was bummed. I thought the OSU West Virginia game was kind of toss-up. I knew Oklahoma State had it in them. I just wasn't sure, and I thought that West Virginia would have a bounce back. And I looking at it, UCF, that should have been one that we at least could have expected a little bit more with Rice Plumlee back, that they could have made it competitive. I mean, they made a good showing against Kansas State. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was such a bummer they couldn't do that. But yeah, some wild action once again in the Big 12. For our top 25 picks, I did a little bit better on. I did a little better on this side of things. So I made a good case for Ohio State, but I refused to pick them, and that's where I got burned.
Yeah, I thought Penn State would be able to represent a little bit more than that. That was too bad. Alabama really showed out. I've got to stop picking against Saban because he's going to burn me every time, apparently. And you called the Utah pick.
Bama on these lists, so you can keep picking.
Right? I know. It's been my Achilles heel. But that Utah pick was savvy. I thought there was no way they were going to beat USC. USC was going to bounce back after that, and USC just looks bad. I mean, that was, and I shouldn't say that. Utah looks good. I don't want to give, I don't want to not give credit where credit's due to the U, because they went in to USC and just dominated it physically in that game, and their offense showed out. I mean, there's a lot to say for Utah. I think that was a savvy pick on your end.
Yeah, their offense had started putting some things together. They're still a little one-dimensional, but I felt like their defense was so good, and USC has struggled at times. I mean, and to allow Colorado to come back in that game and almost win, and so it's just not a team that I've had a lot of faith in, whereas Utah just continues to find ways to grind out wins. For some reason, when I was watching, I thought that you had selected Duke, and I was like, "Oh, he's picked another upset," and then they, Florida State ended up pulling out anyway, pulling away from it. So, it was a pretty good weekend. Oh, Washington State, yeah, that one wasn't even fair. It looked fun for a while, but
no, I figured Oregon was gonna was going to come out angry, and they did. Oregon's such a good program. They took Washington to the wire. I think Washington's the real deal, and those two teams are both very, very good.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the conference shakes out. Pac-12 finally gets their act together. A little
I know.
too late.
Too little, too late. That's right.
All right, so here's where we stand now, and after all that's said and done, we end up in the same place where we started. So only now we're 1 week. I've got 1 week less to kind of make up the difference. So I've got to try a new strategy or something. Really kind of pick some upsets or something. Hopefully, some things will go my way. But speaking of upsets, technically. There was one that we witnessed on Saturday with BYU and Texas Tech.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was a win that, even though, Texas Tech was still within range for a lot of the game, I didn't really feel threatened that Texas Tech was going to win, but also at the same time, I felt incredibly frustrated watching BYU. It was a really weird game.
Yeah, I had different expectations. And I just that first half was so gratifying to watch. It felt really, really good. The defense was incredible. And I'll tell you, after thinking about the game for a couple days, my biggest takeaway is the amazing job our coaching staff has done. We're 5-2. We're knocking on the door of bowl eligibility. I hope we get there. It's an uphill climb to get that last win. I think we'll get it. And we're cobbling together wins. We're beating teams that are superior athletically to us, have more experience in the P5 space, have been playing in the Big 12 for years. This was a big, big win to beat Texas Tech. And I don't want to take away from that. I know the offense is inconsistent. Our wide receivers make incredible catches. Is that because Slovis isn't as accurate as we hope? Is he missing on some of the big passes? Our run game was there, more so than it's been in the past. Aiden Robbins looked mean and big and healthy, and that was fun to watch. That 3rd and 13 run at the end of the game was clutch. And so you just wonder if maybe that run game gets a slight shot in the arm and moves us forward. And so I feel like it's hard to say this as a Cougar fan because you do get frustrated with that offense and the inconsistency. But the defense went out there and just dominated with the 5 turnovers. Even on a 3rd-string quarterback, Texas Tech has more offensive weapons than that. And so I think you got to give our defense a lot of credit. And we're finding ways to win, and that's why I credit the coaching staff. Is we're playing in games where I do feel like we're up against stiffer competition, and we shouldn't necessarily come away with a win, or it shouldn't be a given, and we're finding ways. They call it opportunistic, call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, the team fights. They're well coached, and I think some of the struggles you see come from us cobbling together 60 transfers and figuring out how to do that. We're playing against P5 competition week in and week out. I'm just impressed. I'm happy with the team. It's fun to see them achieve this way, even though I'd rather they win 50-14 instead of 27, and we actually have a second half of football of offensive football. It's good to get the victory, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The win should definitely overshadow any of the frustrations we see, and you're right. We're in the Big 12 where we've already exceeded some expectations out there from the bettors and the analysts, and we're right on par. And so we've got several games left. Granted, it's an uphill battle, as you mentioned, but good chance to find at least one win to become bowl eligible in our first year in the Big 12. So that's huge. And so we should be really happy about that. The frustration, and I can't speak for everybody, but I think where it comes in is that these are issues, the same issues we've continued to see persist throughout the season.
Yes.
And can't really see, where they're being corrected. At least we finally didn't get the illegal touching for a couple weeks in a row now, but so that seems to be ironed out. But you mentioned Robbins, and that is huge, and that might help. That might just help really spark our run game, which could, who knows, really open things up for the offense. So we will see. But yeah, the defense is just playing lights out. And I really think our defense has actually been really good this season. The problem is that they're on the field so much that they get worn down. And so you can't expect them to hold up forever, especially considering that we don't probably have the same depth that some of these other, legacy members of the Big 12 have. So, but that's all right. I mean, you look at the stats, and it's another game that we won, even though we lost in most metrics, but we won in the turnovers and we won in the points, and that's ultimately what matters. The question is, can you really count on winning the turnover battle every game?
No, you can't. And that's the problem with being opportunistic, is the ball's not always going to bounce your way. Some of the turnovers are caused by the havoc we create and the talent of our defense. Some are caused by just boneheaded moves on the offense, or sometimes the ball just bounces that way. I mean, when Tyler Batty hits the guy, hits the returner, and he fumbles it, against any other team, is he going to be holding that ball, in with all 4 points, right? So he doesn't fumble it. It's just, you can only be so opportunistic in a season. It is somewhat a function of your defense being havoc minded and creating those turnovers, but only to a certain degree. And BYU does a good job of taking care of the football. So the turnover margin to a certain degree is because of how you play, but not completely. It is just the way the ball bounces, and it's not going to happen every game. And so the fact they've won 5 games that way, that's awesome. That's awesome. We might get to bowl eligibility because of that. You can't do that year after year. But in year 1 of the Big 12, I'll take it. That's, I'm not complaining. We're 5-2, 7 games into the Big 12 era. That's phenomenal. If we were having the same conversation 3 or 4 years from now with the same mistakes, same inconsistencies, that's a totally different story. But I feel like we got to tip our cap to the stiffer competition we're facing this year, the huge load of transfers that came in preparation for that, and the difficulty it is to have that team gel and mesh. I just feel like at the end of the day, we're not going to get amazing run blocking this year. We're not going to have an O-line that just gels and blows a huge hole in the defense for our guys to run through. That's not going to be them. But even though we can't run the ball, we're still winning ball games, and coming up and playing complementary football where the defense picks up where the offense lacks, or vice versa. And it seems like it's coming together enough to get us through, and to feel like, year 1, we can call it a success.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You just have to hope that, this style of play is going to be enough against this now stiffer competition, especially, we got Texas and OU left. It looks like
the back end of the season is brutal. Yeah.
It is brutal. And as we've been saying for weeks now, a couple of these games that we were chalking up to potential wins are all of a sudden looking a lot more difficult. And so, but I think we will. I think we will reach bowl eligibility now. It's just a matter of when, and they're able to do it, and really how many wins. But yeah, so some improvements though this week, especially getting Robbins back. And you'd mentioned the passes. I just want to hit this. Like, it would be like, it's great to see these incredible one-handed grabs, but I think that's 3 now on the season that were just lights out. But it would be nice if we didn't have to have receivers in those positions where they had to make those one-handed grabs, where they could be a little bit easier. And so I don't know if there's just no separation, so that's the only place, or if really, Keaton's not as accurate as we'd like him to be. But regardless.
So I think Slovis is a great quarterback. I really do. I think he's very good. I just think it emphasizes how spoiled we've been with Zach Wilson and Jaron Hall, who I didn't appreciate how accurate they were. They'd miss on occasion, but really it was just so consistent, really crisp deep balls. Intermediate passing game was so on point, and I took it for granted because I do think Slovis is a really good QB, but I'll see him miss sometimes on the intermediate throws and think, whoa, where did that come from? And then I think, you know what, the guy's a good quarterback. I don't think he's Jaron Hall. I don't think he's Zach Wilson. I hope he's got a shot at the pros, and I really, really like the guy. And so I do think he's a good quarterback. He's done it without a running game, so he's had to shoulder some difficulties that Jaron and Zach didn't have to. But I don't think he's quite as accurate and on par as those guys were. But those are 2 good NFL quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I like Slovis. I don't mean to slam on him at all. I'm happy we have him, and I think he's He's great for the team. But, there are still some question marks. But I think that's a good point is perspective. Look at who we're comparing him against. I mean, even Jaron Hall, I remember at times thinking like, oh, man, he just, needs a little more touch on this or that. And, being kind of nitpicky because he's following, Zach Wilson. So, yeah. So anyway, some signs, some things are promising. Texas Tech is still a good team. They did have their third string quarterback. The turnovers, as we mentioned, killed them. But I still think that they are a quality team. So to be able to come out and beat them, and by double-digit scores too, it really says something. So it's easy to focus on the negative because we can continue to see those same problems pop up, but definitely some good signs and some good mojo as we go into what is going to be a much tougher game this week. Adam, I don't know if you know this, but Texas is good.
Really, really good. Yeah, it's it's going to be a game this week. I'm of two minds in this, and on the one hand, my more logical side says we're going to get trounced. This team is very, very good. I don't care who they have at quarterback. They can put Arch Manning, they can put Malik Murphy, they can put whoever they want back there. And there's just so much talent on both sides of the ball. On the other hand, I have to tip my hat to Satake, who these are the types of games his teams step up for. The Wisconsin game in 2019 comes to mind, and this the Baylor game in 2021. There's just the team rises to the level of competition. I don't think they can rise to this level of competition. And so I do think we'll go in there and I don't know that we'll lose, by 25, 30 points. I hope we keep it within 10 points and come away. I don't love moral victories. I believe in them in this circumstance. But it would take some serious hero ball from Chase Roberts and Rex and Slovis and Aiden Robbins breaking out. This is the best defensive line we've faced in years. They are so good up front, and I think our defense has played great. And yes, we're playing a quarterback who hasn't started a collegiate game, and so which seems to be a trend for us this year. So it could go poorly in that sense for Texas. Their run game is going to be strong, but I just don't see our backup safeties being able to defend against some very athletic wide receivers. Texas is going to win this one comfortably. I hope we don't get banged up. Maybe the best I can say is let's get out of this one healthy and give it our best shot against West Virginia and Iowa State to become bowl eligible, because we're just not built to compete against the number 17 in the country right now. I hope that changes in the coming years, but right now Texas is so athletically superior that I don't think we're going to put too much pressure on them. But I do have to say, Satake's teams love to get up for games like this and just shock the world.
Yeah, they absolutely do, and it's one that you kind of hold your breath and hope that we can do it again. One thing a couple things that have me concerned about that is, one, you mentioned the talent already. The other is that Texas had a kind of surprise close call last week against Houston that I'm sure they would have much rather, won that game much more comfortably than they did and probably expected to. So they might be a little bit more on high alert after that. And then three, really those games where BYU can come out and shock somebody tended because of the nature of being independent and having such a front-loaded schedule, is that so many of those games were at the beginning of the season. So, you talk about Wisconsin. Well, that team came down to earth as the season went on and ended up not, looking like they were not the number 5 team or whatever they were when we went in there. And same with some others. Texas, I think, was still early on when we played them. I'm trying to think of who else, but so at this point, Texas is one. They've shown that they're deserving of the rank that they have. Two, it's not like they've just come out of fall camp and are they kind of know who they are. They have an identity. They've played together, so they have a little bit more experience, even with a backup quarterback. I mean, this guy, from what I understand, is by all accounts still a great quarterback, could be starting for any number of very, very good teams. And
Absolutely.
so I don't think we can expect any kind of drop off there. And so, and I am hopeful that Aiden Robbins is still healthy, that he's able to help our run game and really break through. And because he definitely gives us that different element that we haven't really seen, really power through, much like we had with Algier and even Brooks to an extent. But as you mentioned already, their defensive line and is going to be very tough. I don't think this is the team where BYU is all of a sudden going to figure out how to run the ball. So
Agreed.
There's a lot going against us. I'm still holding on to a sliver of hope, and we'll go into it. And the nice thing about this is you're playing with house money, that if you lose, you're supposed to lose big. Nobody's expecting anything. We're already ahead of schedule in the season in terms of how many wins we have. And so you can go in there and do your best and try to catch the Longhorns off guard. So,
yeah.
I think BYU's in a good position to go in there and see what they can do.
I will say one note on this is I've listened to the Texas Longhorn football podcast this week. It does bring me joy, the fact that historically we are 4-1 against Texas, with their only win coming against us in 2011, 17-16. That's the only win they've had against us. And so from the Longhorn faithful, they do not like playing BYU. BYU does not mean good things. And because of that, they're not taking this game as a given, even though they're heavily favored, even though this is not really a year where we look like we can compete with the number 17 in the country. There's respect there. And it's really gratifying. And I think it's just so happened those years have lined up where we had some good teams and Texas struggled. And but it's fun to listen that there's an element of respect there between these two programs. Sark is an alumnus, and so there's it's good. It's good to see that healthy respect between the programs, and gratifying to listen to that when you're hearing Texas fans talk.
That's awesome. That's good that's coming, because they have to respect BYU because of that record. And you mentioned that 2013 game, and that one was one that was incredibly frustrating. And I can't remember now because I usually revisit the other two games where when I do go back and watch highlights from them. But I remember coming away from that game thinking that was really within grasp for BYU too, and I felt like we had kind of blown it. So
yeah, Ross Oppo dropped a touchdown in the end zone that he just was kicking himself for, that would have won it for us. He was playing in front of his home crowd. I remember that, and we were so close against them. And that was a fun game to watch.
That was a good one. It was frustrating, but fortunately, we had the next couple of years to.
Yeah, the 13 and 14 games made up for it. Taysom.
That's what it was. Yeah, sorry. The one I was talking about, what was that, 11?
Yeah, 2011. Yep.
Yeah, sorry. I misspoke. So anyway, to be clear, officially on the record, we're both selecting Texas here.
That is correct. Texas will come away with the victory. Taysom's not running out of that tunnel.
Could he though? So, all right. We have Oklahoma at Kansas, which should actually be theoretically, we've got OU, who's at the top of the league, and Kansas, who's definitely one of the at the top of the middle, of the top of the rest of the teams in the conference. Are they going to be able to? They're at home, be able to give the Sooners a game?
My question for you: will Jalen Daniels play?
That is the question.
That's the question. That's the question that will determine this game. So, if I had a solid report that Jalen Daniels would play, I would pick Kansas in this game. I would. I am that confident in his skills at home, in front of that crowd. I think they would win that game. I don't think Bean has enough to win the game. So with Daniels in doubt, I'm going with the Sooners on a bounce back game after they almost lost to UCF. I think they'll come in and take care of things. I think we'll target maybe that game against Oklahoma State for Oklahoma to lose this year. But unless Daniels is back, Oklahoma's going to win this one.
Yeah, I actually think Bean is a pretty good quarterback, but Daniels just gives you that next level. And much like I mentioned with Texas having that scare against Houston, OU having that scare against UCF, I think you're right. Will kind of wake them up and kick them back into gear and say, hey, we can't, sleepwalk through this schedule if we want to get to, if we have playoff aspirations. So, yeah, I think the uncertainty, though, of not knowing about Daniels is exactly right. That was the exact same thought process I had, is it's really hard to pick an upset with them when they're not at full strength with, arguably their most important position. So,
yeah.
All right. So, unfortunately, we both picked Texas and OU to win this week. hopefully we're wrong on both those.
Yeah.
All right. So, Houston at Kansas State. Houston had a Hail Mary 2 weeks ago. They took Texas down to the wire and arguably could have won that game. So are they going to be able to do it again? Kansas State has looked fallible this year.
Yeah, Houston has looked good the last couple weeks. I mean, that win against West Virginia was really a shot in the arm. The Texas game, you got to feel good about that. They'll be kicking themselves so they didn't come away with the victory because they were pretty close and could have pulled it out there in the end. I'm going to go with Kansas State because I feel like Kansas State has their groove back again. That win against TCU made me feel better about them, about their offense, their quarterback situation. I think they're starting to really click and figure things out. And Houston is fighting harder than I think anybody anticipated, and they're right there. But they've got a tough schedule to go Texas and then Kansas State. Those are tough teams, and so I'm going to go with Kansas State at home in this one.
Yeah, I'm with you. It really seems that like Kansas State has unlocked something new, and I love that mid-season they saw they were kind of floundering, they needed to do something, and they shook it up a little, and I like that it's paid off and really paid dividends for them. And I also love that Houston did not give up. They could have given up. It seemed like, where they had chance every time, it seemed like they had a chance, they were getting punched in the face. And it seems like that West Virginia game has really given them a lot of confidence. So good for them. I hope they're able to pull out a couple more wins and surprise people. But I just feel like they're hitting Kansas State at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Speaking of West Virginia and UCF, two teams that have, surprise people. Even though UCF hasn't always turned into victories, who's got the momentum this week?
Yeah, that's it. It's interesting because West Virginia was riding high for a bit, and people were saying, "Oh, dark horse candidate to be in the Big 12 championship game," and then they just started to stumble. I mean, after that TCU game, that Houston game was a heartbreaker, and now going to UCF because Plumlee is back. I think there's going to be a bit of swagger from UCF after that Oklahoma game. Again, I don't love moral victories, but for a season like UCF has had and the Baylor meltdown and for all of that, I think they're going to come home at home with Plumlee back and play with some attitude again and try and salvage this season to see if they can't climb back to bowl eligibility. So I'm going to go with UCF in this one.
Yeah, I think you said it. And it's unfortunate because I do think West Virginia will continue to get some wins. I think they have shown that they're being well coached and that they are a team that will fight. It just seems like they might be spiraling a little bit. And UCF, they can put up points. And West Virginia has been relatively stingy defense, but I think that, like you said, with Rice Plumlee coming back, I think that they're able to do enough to get them over that hump against West Virginia and kind of playing with some real swagger. And again, they're at the bounce house. So I think, I don't know. I'm with you. I think UCF is going to keep it going there. Now, Iowa State and Baylor. This is an interesting matchup. What do you make of it?
So Baylor surprised last week by beating Cincy, but Cincinnati is not a great team. As we're seeing, Cincinnati's struggling left and right. So I don't know if that says too much about Baylor. I mentioned before, I do believe in Dave Aranda and Jeff Grimes. I think Baylor's got a good coaching staff and they'll get this together, but not this week and not this year. I think Baylor's going to continue to struggle. Iowa State is building on momentum. It's really impressive what they're putting together there with that defense. Their quarterback Beck is finding ways to win. He's finding ways to move the ball. And remember, he wasn't supposed to be the starter this year. They lost their starter to the gambling probe, and I thought their team was just decimated from that. And obviously, they really struggled at the beginning of the year, but they're hitting their groove, and I think they get this win against Baylor.
Yeah, we've seen that what Baylor's done against teams that are, with tougher defenses. And so Iowa State is certainly going to be one of the tougher defenses they see this year. So I don't think that they're going to be able to do that, even being at home. So I'm with you. I think Iowa State wins this one. And, last week you went against Saban and it was the wrong time for you to turn your back on Grimes and your boy, but because they actually pulled one out. So, but yeah, I'm with you.
I did.
Think this next week it won't happen. So Cincy and OSU, two teams going in different directions.
Completely different directions, and I do think Cincy's going to pull out a win somewhere. They are good enough to cobble together some win somewhere along the way. I think they'll surprise the team. I don't think it's going to be Oklahoma State because Oklahoma State is playing with so much swagger, and they've got their sights set, rightfully so, on the Big 12 championship game. They have a path, which is shocking to say. After the South Alabama game and the Iowa State game, they have a path to the Big 12 championship game, and they're riding that path right now. And I don't think Cincinnati at Oklahoma State is going to be able to slow them down. So Oklahoma State will pull this out.
So you got to love what Gundy is doing with Oklahoma State. This is the kind of midseason turnaround that I think BYU fans keep looking for and not getting. It would be fantastic to see, just find something, a switch somewhere and just see it all come together. And I think it speaks to the coaching job and the personnel. And I think it also helped that they finally settled on a quarterback. But
and started feeding that beast of a running back. Man, he is good.
So I feel like we say that every week with BYU, we're up against it. I feel like the Big 12 is loaded with really good running backs.
I agree.
We talk a lot about the quarterbacks and other things, but I think it's the running backs have been lights out this year. How do we feel about a team that lost to South Alabama winning the conference? Like, let's say it gets to that point, they get there and they play for the conference championship and win. How do we feel about that? What does that say about the Big 12?
Yeah, I'm a little uncomfortable with it. It's very 2023 Big 12. Like, it just speaks to the season. I mean, there's so much craziness going on week in and week out with unexpected victories and teams turning their seasons around. And so maybe Oklahoma State doesn't get there, but I feel like they've got a path. They might drop one on their way to the Oklahoma game. I think they'll beat Oklahoma in an upset. And so I don't know. Part of me thinks they've made me a bit of a believer just because that's such a Mike Gundy type of season to just everybody says, they're down this year. Let's look past them. And all of a sudden, they're like the Undertaker. They just pop up and they come back to life. And it's hard to see them. It's hard to see them losing a game the way they're playing. It's just on all sides of the ball. They're moving so well. And I say that and watch Cincinnati come and beat them at home. And we're sitting here talking next week about, boy, what happened to Oklahoma State. But right now they're clicking on all cylinders, and it's hard to imagine them losing this game or really any of the others upcoming on their schedule.
Yeah, and they're not just winning games. I mean, they beat Kansas State, who was really good, and I have them, and I think most or a lot of people do have them as, third in our power rankings right now. And Kansas, also a very good team. Granted, they've had their ups and downs, but their only other loss is to Texas, which was a competitive game until the fourth quarter with their backup quarterback. And then West Virginia, who has showed, they were actually a pretty tough team, and this was in Morgantown. So this is what they've done is really impressive. It's not like they just rattled off, they got to an easy part, soft part of the schedule and were able to rattle off some wins. These are legit wins. So I think Oklahoma State is for real now. If they continue to look for real, or if, it all falls apart at some point, we will see. But I like them at this point in the season.
Yeah.
So, okay. We're going a little long. I thought, we had a fewer teams. We'd go a little bit quicker tonight, but so now we're on to we're out of Big 12, and we got some of our other top matchups. So we got the what is the it's too late for me. The cocktail. What do they call this? The rivalry. Don't worry about it. So
I'll
it'll
have to
come.
pass. It's
Okay.
Florida, Georgia. Those are that's all you need. Those two, man, this is going to be a good game. And I'll tell you, if this was 2 weeks ago, I would have picked Florida hands down, because I felt like Georgia was struggling. Georgia woke up. Unfortunately for all of college football, Georgia has woken up. And if Florida keeps building on their success, they may be able to compete and pull this one out in the next couple of years. I don't think they'll do it this year. Georgia's found their groove, and I'm going to stick with Georgia until somebody proves me wrong, because they just look unbeatable right now.
Yeah, I tried talking myself into Florida. I tried, looking at the stats and looking at this, but I do think Florida's a good team. I do think they have what it takes to possibly pull an upset. I just think they're, like you said, they're hitting Georgia at the wrong time in the season, and they figured some things out. And Florida, as talented and as good as they are in many respects, they're still a flawed team, so I think this one is going to go to the Bulldogs, unfortunately. So, all right. So Oregon, Utah. This is this should be a good matchup. What do you make of it?
Yeah, this is going to be a really good matchup, and it's at Utah, which definitely plays into this.
Yes.
This is such a tough pick now after last week. Even though I think Oregon is a much better team than USC, Utah's playing with some well-deserved swagger. Their offense woke up, and scored some points against a bad USC defense. But early on in the season, Utah couldn't score against bad defenses, let alone any defense. So Oregon's going to come in there with a much better defense. I have Oregon in this one on the road, because I still don't have enough confidence in Utah's offense to win a game like this. Because I do think Oregon is the team that we thought USC was. Oregon goes toe-to-toe with Washington. They crush Colorado. Oregon is a very, very good team this year. I thought USC was, and Utah, for all intents and purposes, is a very good team as well. But they lost at Oregon State, and I think that's the type of game we see here, even at Utah. Oregon's going to pull this one out, just superior on both sides of the ball. Oregon's offense is so good, and their defense is stingy enough to get by in this one.
Yeah, so Utah with USC, the thing about them is they always tend to play USC really well. And the other thing is they were lucky enough to, not lucky, I mean, I'm not trying to poo-poo, what they did this season, but they were lucky enough to play teams where their defense was enough to win games early on in the season, which allowed their offense to figure some things out and wake up. And is it a stellar offense? No. And I do think it's tough to pick against Utah when they're at home. Like you said, they're really playing with some swag right now, but I still feel like their offense is too one-dimensional. And I mean, they've done some good things. Their quarterback, you got to give him credit, but I think Oregon is just ultimately going to be too good, and this is just a different type of game. Although I do think that Utah keeps it interesting. I think their defense is that good to keep this an interesting game, but I think ultimately Oregon is going to pull this one out. Oh, now Duke Louisville. So this is hardly like, when you hear that, it doesn't scream like a headlining matchup, but these are two ranked teams, really both competing in the ACC. Remember, they don't have divisions anymore. And so really, I think a fair amount on the line for these two programs that are really trying to break through. So what do you make of it? And actually, This is our first predictor that we've had from ESPN too, out of all these matchups.
It is. This is much more of a toss-up, and it's tough to say. Both teams have had their high moments and their lows this season, and they're both really, really good. I think the ACC has some good teams this year. It's been exciting football. I'm still hopeful that one of them can nab Florida State at some point this year, but they keep proving me wrong. I've picked Duke twice for upset wins, and I have been wrong on both of them. So fool me twice. Shame on me. Is that what it is? I'm going with Louisville.
You pulled a Michael Scott.
That's right.
So you're going to Louisville. I am actually going with Duke on this one. For some reason, I just like what Duke is doing this year, and I think that they're really well coached, and I think that I don't know. I just see them. I really haven't watched as I don't think I've watched any Louisville and watched not as much Duke as I would have liked, but I do like what they're doing, and I think that they are going to go in there. If you look at their schedule, I feel like that they've done more than Louisville. They've shown me more, and I like them in the upset. So
All right.
plus we had all the same picks and we needed to differ somewhere, but I did
That's
have
right.
Duke anyway. Okay, so Colorado at UCLA.
Yeah. For me, this is
The bounce back after that embarrassing loss to Stanford.
this is the toughest one of the entire week for me, because Colorado has played with so much swagger, and they've really overperformed this year with no offensive line, and not much of a defense. They have somehow cobbled together some pretty impressive victories, but the TCU win is looking less and less impressive as time goes on. Um, and likewise for some of their other victories. And then they had the meltdown at Stanford. I worry about the psyche of this team. If they were playing at home, I'd feel a little bit more confidence in them. I don't feel tons of confidence in UCLA, but this to me is the toughest game to pick. I thought Colorado was going to waltz through their schedule after they got through the tough, the tough games against their ranked opponents early in the year. I thought they'd win out, but now I'm not so sure. They look vulnerable. I felt like they were a team that just played with a lot of bitterness. You saw the video that's been widely circulated about their smack before the Oregon game, and just the caustic attitudes they had that got shoved back in their face. That's a toxic feeling that just erodes a team over time, where they're not playing with a lot of joy, and especially as the losses accumulate. What are you playing for? And Neon Dion called his team out after the last loss and said, I don't know if they love football. So he's really going to challenge the team. I think they'll come out early and they'll play really well. But I'm going to go with UCLA in this one because I'm starting to doubt the Buffaloes have what it takes to really get through the grind of the season.
Yeah, I wasn't really I was surprised by the Stanford loss, but I wasn't really surprised, that Colorado came down to earth. Look at the wins that they had, even Nebraska, which was, I'd say, a pretty impressive win. It was a good defense, a solid team, but none of these wins were over really good teams. And now that we've seen USC with the holes that they have, it's just you go through the schedule and you start seeing that maybe they don't have what it takes. And when you talk about Colorado's players not loving football, well, no, they love the hype. They love the glam and all that. And that was my concern going into this season was, you got a lot of good players, but a lot of good players that are used to, being good. They're used to being, told how good they are. And then they show up and they want to be part of this show. And now they are. But I was really impressed early on because it felt like, as much as Prime is about that, it seemed like he really had his team disciplined and working hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's disappointing to see them fall off like this. UCLA, on the other hand, this is a home game, and this is probably, a better coach team. In many ways, they've got a much better defense, and but Colorado's continued to find ways to generally put up points other than that Oregon game, regardless. And so I don't feel great about this, and this might be an emotional pick, but I just lost a lot of faith in UCLA as I watched them in some of these games, like the Utah game when Utah's offense was really bad at that point in the season, and UCLA just could not get anything going. And granted, it was at Utah, and Utah's got a great defense, but so I don't know. I'm kind of, again, this might be emotional, but I feel like Coach Prime they had the bye week, had time to really lock in and get his team focused and pulled together. And this is where we really are going to see, is he going to be able to help them regroup and bounce back, or are they just going to continue to spiral down? But I think this is going to be actually kind of an exciting game, and I like Colorado in this one.
Okay.
No, I don't necessarily like Colorado in this one, but I'm picking Colorado in this one to pick kind of an upset. All right, and then lastly, our last pick, going to the G5. This is one with potential playoff implications here. UNLV, again, Fresno State. I had to see that again. So, what do you think is going to happen in this one?
Yeah, tough to say. UNLV is slowly building a program to be competitive there. You remember Aiden Robbins transferred from there. He rushed for 1,000 yards there last year, and they're trending in the right direction. I like Fresno in this because they're battle tested. They've lost in some tough matchups, and I think Fresno State's got the talent. UNLV is trending in the right direction, and they may be able to win these games in the future. But I don't know that they can go at Fresno State and win in a year where Fresno State's a pretty solid football team. So I'm going to go Fresno State.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. The way you phrase it, that they're battle tested, and I don't know. Maybe this is just biased because I'm not used to seeing UNLV win football games. But I'm going to go with Fresno at home. These are two solid teams, but Fresno being a little more established, and it is at home for them. I gotta pick the Bulldogs in this one. So, all right. Well, we got a wild weekend ahead, and look forward to watching some football, and hopefully we get some upsets, and hopefully we are wrong on a few of our picks, at least mostly the BYU Texas one. So anyway, again, please let us know in the comments your picks for this week, and please like the video and subscribe to the channel. And as always, go Cougs.
Go Cougs. Thanks, Trevor.